Howdy, folks, and welcome to Saddle and Sixskin, your home for tales of the Old West. I'm your host, and today we've got a story that'll warm your hearts, even if it's set in the dead of winter. This ain't your typical gunslinger yarn, it's about resilience, kindness, and the unexpected ways life can turn around, especially for those of us who've seen a few winters ourselves. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy stories like this, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin for more tales from the wild frontier. Let's saddle up and ride into our story, shall we? Picture this, it's 1873, and a bitter winter wind is howling through the Colorado mountains. A young widow named Lucy Zeller is huddled in her dilapidated cabin with her 6-month-old daughter, Emma. The situation is dire. 3 days have passed since they finished the last of their food. Lucy's eyes, etched with worry, fixate on the empty wooden plates, a stark reminder of their predicament. The vast, lonely mountains seem to mock her desperate circumstances, amplifying the feeling of isolation. The crying infant, Emma, mirrors her mother's inconsolable hunger, her wails echoing through the drafty cabin. Can you imagine the fear, the desperation a young mother might feel? Lucy, despite her own gnawing hunger, gently strokes Emma's fine blonde hair, humming a lullaby, a relic from happier times, when her own mother sang it to her. She is only 23, yet life has already dealt her a cruel hand. She never imagined finding herself a widow, struggling to survive a brutal winter alone in the unforgiving mountains, responsible for the life of an infant. The fever had claimed her husband, Daniel, with terrifying speed. One day, he was splitting wood, strong and full of life. The next, he was consumed by a raging fever. The loss still felt so fresh, a gaping wound in her heart. And here she was, alone, responsible for keeping her and her daughter from dying. 3 days after the fever took him, Lucy had buried Daniel behind their homestead, the ground barely thawed enough to allow her to dig. It was her hope that by putting him to rest, she could do the same for her soul as well. "Hush now, little one," Lucy whispers to Emma, her voice strained with a mixture of exhaustion and tenderness, even though her own stomach churns with hunger pangs. "We'll find something soon." But hope is a dwindling resource in these harsh conditions. Suddenly, the sound of approaching hoofbeats pierces the silence, making Lucy freeze in place. Now, this far into the mountains, especially in February, visitors are a rare occurrence. Who could it be? What did they want? Bandits and drifters, preying on the vulnerable, were a common threat in these remote areas. A lone woman was an easy target, especially in the Colorado mountains. With a surge of adrenaline, she quickly places Emma in the small wooden cradle that Daniel had lovingly crafted before his death. Lucy reaches for the shotgun, its cold metal offering a sliver of protection, leaning against the wall near the door. The knock that follows is firm but not aggressive, adding to the uncertainty. Lucy positions herself behind the door, shotgun ready, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this a threat or an opportunity? What should she do? Remember to subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin, and if you enjoyed this story, show it some love with a like. "Hello, anybody home?" A deep, resonant voice calls out from the other side of the door. "I'm looking for shelter from the storm coming in." Lucy remains silent, assessing her options, weighing the risks. Should she trust a stranger? Could she afford not to? "I've got food," the voice adds, a persuasive edge creeping in. "Plenty to share." At the mere mention of food, Lucy's resolve begins to crumble. The baby whimpered from within her tiny cradle. Emma's cries have quieted to whimpers, a testament to her weakening state, but Lucy knows they won't survive the week without supplies, and what was more, the girl would die of starvation if Lucy didn't do something. She was becoming increasingly desperate and knew she couldn't survive if it weren't for help coming from someone, somehow. "What would you do?" "State your business," she calls out through the door, trying to project a strength she doesn't feel, hoping she sounds more intimidating than she is. "Name's Thomas Price. I'm a rancher passing through on my way to Fort Collins." He continues, his voice calm and steady. "A storm's brewing something fierce, and I could sure use some shelter for the night. I can pay with food and supplies." Lucy hesitates, battling her instincts. The desperation in her child's cry nearly brings her to her knees, but the fear of the unknown, of placing her trust in a stranger, holds her back. Finally, she slowly opens the door just enough to cautiously peek out at the man standing before her. He stands tall against the gray, stormy sky, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face that speaks of countless days spent under the sun. Kind eyes soften the ruggedness of his features, eyes that seem to instantly grasp the severity of her situation. His horse is heavily loaded with supplies, and he holds the reins of a second pack horse, similarly burdened, making Lucy question if this stranger might just be the answer to her prayers. "You're alone," he states, not as a question, but an observation, tinged with genuine concern. Can Lucy afford to trust this man? Would you? Lucy nods, instinctively clutching the shotgun a bit tighter, but not quite lowering it. "Me and my daughter." Thomas's gaze flickers towards Emma's cradle, visible through the doorway, then returns to Lucy's face. "I won't trouble you, madam," he says, his voice reassuring. "But that storm's going to hit within the hour, and it looks to be a bad one. I've got dried beef, flour, beans, coffee, and some preserves. You're welcome to some, either way." He paused for her answer. The sincerity in his voice and the genuineness of his concern makes Lucy lower the shotgun slightly. The man doesn't possess the hardened look of an outlaw, and his clothes, though dusty from travel, are of good quality, suggesting a man of some means. His offer of food, regardless of whether she provides shelter, speaks volumes about his character. Could he really be this trustworthy? "You can stay in the barn," she finally says, nodding towards the small, dilapidated structure behind the cabin. Now, we're halfway through our story, so be sure to subscribe and click that like button if you're enjoying it. Thomas smiles, revealing a dimple in his right cheek, a small detail that adds to his disarming demeanor. "That's mighty kind of you." "Thank you." True to his word, before even leading his horses to the barn, Thomas unloads a surprising amount of provisions onto Lucy's bare wooden table. Flour, dried beef, beans, coffee, sugar, and even a small jar of honey. Lucy stares at the bounty, a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude washing over her. She can't remember the last time she saw so much food at once. "I can't accept all this," she says, though her empty stomach protests vehemently. It was a feeling Lucy was all too familiar with, at this point, but now, the end of her problems was in sight. Thomas removes his hat, revealing thick brown hair with hints of copper in the fading light. "Consider it payment for the shelter," he says, his gaze direct and sincere. "That barn's going to feel like a palace compared to being caught out in what's coming." As if on cue, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters with a renewed fury. Emma begins to cry again, her wails growing in intensity, and Lucy immediately goes to her, lifting the infant to her shoulder and gently rocking her. "Your little one sounds hungry," Thomas observes gently, his voice filled with concern. "Why don't I step out to the barn while you see to her? I'll be back to help with supper if you'll allow it." Lucy nods, silently grateful for his understanding and discretion, feeling a sense of relief she hasn't experienced in weeks. Once he leaves, she quickly prepares a thin gruel from the flour and water, adding a precious spoonful of honey, a luxury she hadn't dared to indulge in recently. It isn't much, but it's significantly more than they've had in days. She feeds Emma first, watching her daughter's eager acceptance of the simple food with tears in her eyes. Seeing her child nourished fills Lucy with a profound sense of relief and hope. True to his word, Thomas returns after giving Lucy ample time to feed Emma. He knocks respectfully before entering, bringing in an armload of firewood. "Now, what do you think will happen next between Lucy and Thomas?" "Thought you might need this," he says, stacking it neatly by the fireplace. "Storm's hitting hard now. Mind if I cook us up something proper?" Lucy watches in amazement as Thomas moves around her small kitchen with unexpected competence, his actions betraying a familiarity that seems out of place. He builds up the fire, sets water to boil, and begins preparing a hearty stew with the dried beef, beans, and some dried vegetables from his supplies. What did he learn to cook like this? Where did you learn to cook? Lucy asks, bouncing Emma gently as the baby, finally full and content, coos softly. The tiny noises she made let Lucy know she was on the mend. Thomas smiles as he stirs the pot, his expression softening. My ma died when I was 12, he replies, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. Pa wasn't much for cooking, so it was learn or starve. 5 brothers made for hungry mouths. He pauses for a moment. You have a large family, Lucy comments, trying to fill the sudden silence. Had, he corrects softly, the single word carrying a weight of untold stories. Lost pa and 2 brothers in the war. 1 brother took off for the California gold fields, haven't heard from him in 3 years. The other brother runs the family ranch in Wyoming territory with his wife. Lucy's heart goes out to him, understanding the loss and pain that he had to deal with. I'm sorry, Lucy says, recognizing the familiar shadow of loss in his eyes. Life out west isn't for the faint of heart, he shrugged and said, but it's got its moments. He gestures towards Emma with a gentle smile. Your little one seems happier now. Amazing what a little food can do, Lucy admits. We haven't had much lately. Thomas's eyes travel to the empty plates on the table, understanding dawning on his face. There was a realization of who Lucy was and why she was so desperate. Your husband, fever took him 2 months ago, Lucy says simply, stating the truth plainly. Daniel had big dreams of making a life up here. We came from Missouri last year. Thomas nods, not pressing for more details, respecting her privacy as he continues to prepare the meal. When he finally sets 2 steaming bowls on the table, Lucy's hands tremble slightly as she accepts hers, overwhelmed by the simple act of kindness. It had been so long since someone had done something like that for her. This is the kindest thing anyone's done for us since Daniel passed, she admits, savoring the rich aroma of the stew. Thomas sits across from her, his expression serious. Neighbors should help neighbors out here. It's the only way to survive. We don't have neighbors, Lucy says, pointing out the obvious fact. Not for miles. Then I'm glad the storm brought me this way, Thomas replies with a gentle smile. They eat in comfortable silence, the howling wind outside making the warm cabin feel like a sanctuary. After dinner, Thomas insists on washing the dishes while Lucy tends to Emma, giving her a rare moment to simply relax. You should take the bed, Lucy says as the evening grows late, feeling a sense of guilt that he's sacrificing his comfort for them. The chair is comfortable enough for me, she adds, trying to reassure him. Thomas shakes his head firmly. I'll be fine in the barn. Got my bedroll, and the horses for warmth. This way he could protect her and the baby as well, he rationalized. The temperature is dropping fast, Lucy argues, worried about his well-being. The barn roof leaks in 3 places. Her tone was filled with concern. I can't in good conscience let you sleep out there after all you've done for us. After some debate, they reach a compromise. Thomas will sleep on a pallet near the fireplace while Lucy and Emma take the small bed in the corner of the one-room cabin. As Lucy drifts off to sleep that night, her daughter finally peaceful beside her, and her stomach full for the first time in weeks, she can't help but wonder what twist of fate had brought Thomas Price to her door on this particular day. Was this divine intervention? Or just a chance encounter? Only time would tell. The empty plates of days gone by are just a memory now. I hope you all loved our story today. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. See you next time. The blizzard that had brought Thomas to Lucy's cabin lasted for 3 days, 3 days in which he chopped enough firewood to last weeks, repaired the leaking roof, reinforced the barn walls, and cooked hearty meals that brought color back to Lucy's pale cheeks. They fell into an easy rhythm, with Thomas tending to the outdoor chores while Lucy cared for Emma and kept the cabin in order. They even had some conversations where they exchanged stories with one another. On the morning of the fourth day, Lucy woke to sunshine streaming through the windows and the familiar sounds of Thomas splitting wood outside. She fed Emma and was preparing breakfast when he came in, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "Storm's past," he announced, stomping snow from his boots. "Trail should be passable by midday." Lucy felt her heart sink at his words, though she knew he would have to leave eventually. "You're welcome to stay another day if the trail's still rough," she offered, trying to keep her voice casual. She knew she didn't want him to leave, but she also knew it was inevitable. Thomas hung his coat by the door, his expression unreadable. What could he be thinking? "That's kind of you, but I should get moving. Got business waiting in Fort Collins." They ate breakfast in silence, the easy conversation of the past days suddenly strained. Emma, sensing the change in mood, fussed in her cradle until Lucy picked her up, trying to comfort her. "She's taken a shine to you," Lucy commented as Emma's eyes followed Thomas around the room. It seemed the baby felt the same connection to Thomas she felt. Thomas smiled, reaching out to let Emma grasp his finger with her tiny hand. "Smart girl. Takes after her ma." As Thomas prepared to leave, loading his supplies onto his horses, Lucy stood in the doorway with Emma, unsure what to say. Thomas had brought more than just food to their table, he had brought hope and companionship when she'd needed it most. "And what do you do when the one you need the most leaves?" "I can't thank you enough," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. There were no words that could describe what she truly felt. Thomas adjusted his saddle, avoiding her eyes. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Lucy said firmly, her conviction strong. "Not anyone." Thomas paused, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small package wrapped in oilcloth. "Almost forgot. Some extra supplies for you and little Emma." Lucy accepted the package, finding it heavier than expected. What could it be? Inside were coffee, sugar, salt, and ammunition for her shotgun. "Thomas, this is too much." "It's not enough," he interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. "Mrs. Zeller, Lucy," she corrected softly, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Lucy," he amended with a smile. "I can't in good conscience ride away knowing you're up here alone with winter not yet finished. Let me help you get to town or to your family." Lucy shook her head, her determination unwavering. This land was Daniel's dream. "I can't abandon it." "Dreams change," Thomas said gently. "And sometimes they need to." "I have nowhere else to go," Lucy admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "No family left back east." Thomas stood silently for a moment, contemplating. Then he said, "My ranch is a 3-day ride from here. I'm heading to Fort Collins for supplies and to hire hands for the spring cattle drive. I'll be back this way in about 10 days. If you're still determined to stay, I'll bring more supplies. If you've changed your mind, there's room for you and Emma." Lucy stared at him, surprised by the offer. What was he up to? "You do that for strangers?" Thomas mounted his horse, looking down at her with those kind eyes that had first convinced her to open her door. "You and Emma aren't strangers anymore, Lucy. Think about it. I'll be back either way." With that, he tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Lucy standing in the doorway, watching until he disappeared around the bend in the trail. How long will he be gone? The 10 days after Thomas left were the longest of Lucy's life. With the provisions he'd left, she and Emma were comfortable enough, but the cabin felt emptier than ever before. She found herself talking to Emma about him, recounting the stories he'd told during the storm about his ranch and his adventures driving cattle. Was she falling for him? On the 9th day, Lucy made her decision. She packed their meager belongings, carefully wrapping Daniel's pocket watch and the small portrait they'd had made in St. Louis before heading west. This was it, a new chapter, a new opportunity. She wrote a letter and placed it in a tin box nailed to the cabin door, addressed to Daniel's younger brother, who had promised to visit in the spring, but had yet to make the journey. The letter explained her decision, expressed her hope that he would understand, and offered him the cabin and land if he still wanted it. If not, she wrote, he could sell it and keep the money with her blessing. She sealed the letter and nailed it shut to the door. On the morning of the 10th day, Lucy dressed Emma in her warmest clothes and waited by the window, watching the trail. By midday, her hope began to waver. By late afternoon, she worried that Thomas had encountered trouble on the trail. Was he coming back at all? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Lucy fought back tears of disappointment. This was going to happen all over again. "He'll come tomorrow," she told Emma, trying to convince herself as much as the baby. "The trail might be slow." Emma babbled in response, playing with a small wooden horse Thomas had carved for her during the storm. Lucy smiled despite her worry, remembering how he'd worked on it by firelight each evening, his large hand surprisingly gentle as they shaped the simple toy. Suddenly, the sound of hoofbeats made her heart leap. She rushed to the door, Emma on her hip, and threw it open to see not one rider, but 3 approaching the cabin. Thomas rode in front, his familiar figure a welcome sight. It was him. Behind him were 2 other men, all leading pack horses laden with supplies. He wasn't alone. "You came back," Lucy said as Thomas dismounted in front of the cabin, her voice filled with relief. "I said I would," he replied simply, his eyes taking in the packed bags visible through the open door. "Looks like you've made a decision." Lucy nodded, suddenly nervous. "If the offer still stands." Thomas's smile lit up his face. "It does." He was truly happy to see her. "Lucy, Emma, I'd like you to meet Jacob and Samuel, 2 of my ranch hands. They insisted on coming along when I told them about a lady and her baby needing escort to the ranch." "What nice guys." The other men tipped their hats respectfully, and Lucy nodded in greeting. "We'll camp here tonight and head out at first light," Thomas said. "It's a 3-day journey if the weather holds." That evening, as Jacob and Samuel set up camp outside, Thomas sat at Lucy's table one last time, explaining his ranch operations in more detail. He was so happy that she decided to go with him. "It's nothing fancy," he warned. "Main house has 3 bedrooms, a good kitchen and a parlor, bunkhouse for the hands, barn, corral, and about 50 acres of grazing land with access to the river. Running about 200 head of cattle now, looking to expand come summer. What a hard-working guy." "It sounds wonderful," Lucy said honestly, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Thomas hesitated, then reached across the table to take her hand. "Lucy, I want to be clear about something. I'm offering you a home and safety, nothing more. You'll have your own room, Emma, too, when she's older. There are no expectations. You've lost your husband recently, and I respect that." He held her hand. Lucy turned her hand to grasp his. "Thank you for saying that, but Thomas, I should be clear, too. Daniel was a good man who died too young. I mourned him deeply, and I always will remember him kindly, but I'm also a practical woman. Life out here doesn't allow for lengthy grief if you want to survive." He took it all in. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I don't know what the future holds," Lucy continued, "but I do know that in 3 days of a snowstorm, you showed me more kindness and consideration than most people show in a lifetime. Whatever comes next, I'm grateful for that." She was so happy he was helping her out. The journey to Thomas's ranch took exactly 3 days, as predicted. They traveled steadily, stopping frequently to rest the horses and to allow Lucy to tend to Emma. Jacob and Samuel proved to be respectful companions, entertaining Emma with silly faces and helping Lucy on and off her horse without being asked. How very kind of them to go out of their way. Thomas rode beside Lucy most of the way, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area. By the time they crested the final ridge overlooking the valley where his ranch sat, Lucy felt as though she'd known him for years rather than days. It was a connection she hadn't felt with anyone before. "There it is," Thomas said, gesturing toward the cluster of buildings below. "Price Ranch." Lucy took in the sight with rising excitement. The ranch house was larger than Thomas had described, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Several outbuildings surrounded it, including a large barn, bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a workshop. In the distance, cattle grazed in fenced pastures that stretched to the base of mountains similar to those she'd left behind. "It's beautiful," Lucy breathed, a sense of awe washing over her. Thomas smiled with obvious pride. "It's home." As they rode into the yard, a plump older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Thomas Price, you're 3 days late, and I was about to send the boys looking for you," she called, her stern tone belied by the affection in her eyes. "So this must be a very close friend of his." "Sorry, Martha," Thomas replied, dismounting smoothly. "Had some precious cargo to transport carefully." He turned to help Lucy down from her horse, lifting Emma from her arms with practiced ease. Martha's eyes widened as she took in Lucy and the baby. "Well, now, you didn't mention bringing home a family when you left," she said in a joking way. Thomas introduced Lucy and Emma to Martha Davidson, the widow who had kept house for him since he'd established the ranch 5 years earlier. Martha's initial surprise quickly gave way to motherly fussing as she ushered Lucy and Emma into the house, already planning hot baths and fresh clothes for both. What a nice gesture. The main house was warm and welcoming, simply but comfortably furnished. Martha showed Lucy to a large bedroom on the second floor with a smaller adjoining room perfect for Emma. It was better than anything Lucy ever could have dreamed. "Thomas had the men move this cradle in yesterday," Martha explained, showing Lucy the beautifully crafted cherrywood cradle in the smaller room. "Said his little guest would need a proper place to sleep." Lucy ran her hand over the smooth wood, touched by the thoughtfulness. "He went to all this trouble without knowing if I'd come." "That's Thomas, always preparing for possibilities," Martha smiled knowingly. She patted Lucy's arm. "Get settled, dear. Supper's in an hour." That first evening at Price Ranch established the pattern for the weeks to come. Meals were lively affairs, with Thomas and whatever ranch hands were present sharing news and stories. Lucy found herself laughing more than she had in months, with Emma passed from lap to lap, thoroughly enjoying being the center of attention. It seemed she was finally at peace with life. As winter gave way to spring, Lucy found her place in the rhythm of ranch life. She took over much of the cooking from Martha, who gratefully focused on the household management and laundry. Lucy planted a vegetable garden behind the house, started keeping chickens, and even learned to ride properly under Thomas's patient instruction. She was finally getting back on her feet. Thomas, for his part, was true to his word about expectations. He was unfailingly kind and increasingly attentive, but never presumptuous. In the evenings, after Emma was asleep, they often sat on the porch or by the fire, talking about everything and nothing until the hour grew late. They were truly falling for one another. As April turned to May, Lucy realized she had fallen in love with Thomas Price. It wasn't the passionate whirlwind she'd experienced with Daniel, but something deeper and steadier, a love built on respect, gratitude, and genuine affection that had grown naturally over shared meals and quiet conversations. But what did Thomas think? Whether Thomas felt the same, she couldn't be certain. He treated her with warmth and consideration, but maintained a respectful distance that sometimes frustrated her. Lucy began to wonder if he saw her only as a responsibility he'd taken on, a widow and child to protect rather than a woman to love. But what did Lucy really think? The answer came unexpectedly one evening in late May. Thomas had been away for 2 days, checking on cattle in the far pastures. Lucy had just put Emma to bed and was sitting on the porch enjoying the mild spring evening when he rode into the yard. "You're still up," he said, sounding pleased as he climbed the porch steps after seeing to his horse. "Couldn't sleep," Lucy admitted. "Too quiet without you around." Thomas sat beside her on the porch swing, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Missed you too, both of you." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. "Lucy," Thomas finally said, his voice unusually hesitant. "There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." Lucy turned to face him, her heart quickening. What was he going to say? "What is it?" "I've been thinking about the future." "Your future and Emma's." Lucy nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral despite her rising hopes. "You've been here 3 months now," Thomas continued. "You've made this place better in ways I never imagined. The house feels like a home now, not just somewhere to sleep between workdays." "I'm glad," Lucy said softly, her heart swelling with emotion. "You've given us so much, Thomas." Thomas shook his head. "That's just it. I haven't given you what you deserve: security, permanence." He took a deep breath. "Lucy, I'd like to adopt Emma legally, make her my daughter in the eyes of the law. And I'd like to marry you, if you'll have me." This was a dream come true for Lucy. Lucy stared at him momentarily, speechless. Thomas misinterpreted her silence. "I know it might seem sudden, or maybe it's too soon after Daniel. If you need time." "Yes," Lucy interrupted, finding her voice. "Yes to both." Thomas's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? Really?" Lucy confirmed, her own smile matching his. "But Thomas, I need to know something. Is this proposal about providing for us, or is there more to it?" Thomas took her hands in his. "Lucy Zeller, from the moment I saw you standing in that cabin doorway, shotgun in hand and determination in your eyes, despite having nothing but empty plates on your table, I admired you. These past months, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and kindness, I've fallen completely in love with you." Finally. Lucy felt tears of happiness well in her eyes. "I love you too, Thomas. I have for some time now." Thomas leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Lucy met him halfway. Their first kiss, gentle and sweet, full of promise. How long had they waited for this? When they parted, Thomas kept her hands in his. "I want you to know I'll never try to replace Daniel in your heart, or in Emma's memories when she's older. She'll know about her father and the brave man he was." "Thank you for that," Lucy said, deeply touched. "Daniel would have liked you. I think he always said a measure of a man was how he treated those who couldn't do anything for him in return. What a lovely way to remember him." "Sounds like a wise man," Thomas said. "I'm sorry I never got to meet him. Every time you look at Emma, you're seeing a part of him. She has his eyes." Thomas nodded, and her mother's spirit. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, with Martha, the ranch hands, and several neighboring families in attendance. Emma, dressed in a lacy white dress Martha had sewn, charmed everyone by babbling happily throughout the ceremony. This was a lovely wedding. Lucy wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white, a practical choice that Thomas appreciated. "You look beautiful," he whispered as they exchanged vows. The town judge who performed the ceremony also processed the adoption papers, making everything official in a single day. They were finally happy, but what else would occur? By sunset, they were Mr. and Mrs. Price, with Emma legally their daughter. The celebration at the ranch afterward was lively with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. As evening fell, Thomas found Lucy sitting on the porch steps, watching Emma being entertained by Jacob's wife, Rebecca. "Happy?" he asked, sitting beside her. "More than I ever thought possible again," Lucy admitted. This was the best day of her life. "When Daniel died, I thought that was the end of any chance at happiness, just survival for Emma's sake." Thomas put his arm around her shoulders. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Speaking of surprises, Lucy said, turning to face him with a smile, I have one for you. Thomas raised an eyebrow questioningly. Martha helped me confirm it yesterday, Lucy continued, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. Emma's going to be a big sister come winter. Thomas's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to elation in the span of seconds. A true gift. A baby? Our baby? Lucy nodded, laughing as Thomas let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off the ground in a gentle spin. Put me down, you fool, she giggled. Everyone's watching. Let them watch, Thomas declared, though he set her carefully on her feet. I want the whole world to know how blessed I am. He kissed her thoroughly, heedless of the whistles and cheers from their guests. A perfect life. Later that night, with their guests gone and Emma sleeping peacefully in her room, Thomas and Lucy stood on the porch, looking out at the land that was now truly their home. Remember the first meal we shared? Thomas asked, his arms wrapped around Lucy from behind, his hands resting protectively over her stomach. Of course, Lucy said. You filled our empty table and changed our lives. No, Thomas corrected gently. You and Emma were already a family. I was just lucky enough to be invited in. They were a family. Lucy turned in his arms to face him. We're all lucky, I think. As they shared another kiss under the vast canopy of stars, Lucy reflected on the journey that had brought them there. From empty plates and desperate prayers to a full table and a home overflowing with love, their story had only just begun. But what else? By the following spring, Price Ranch had expanded in every way. Thomas had acquired adjacent land, increasing their grazing capacity and allowing them to add another 50 head of cattle. The vegetable garden Lucy had started now fed not only their growing family but provided enough excess to trade with neighbors for other goods. Everyone prospered. Emma, now 15 months old, toddled everywhere, a constant bundle of energy with Thomas's dimpled smile and her father Daniel's curious eyes. She followed Thomas whenever possible, perched happily on his shoulders as he did his morning inspections of the ranch. And in March, Lucy gave birth to their son, William Thomas Price, a sturdy boy with a shock of copper hair and his mother's determined expression. Another happy day for them all. Thomas wept openly when he first held his son, overwhelmed by the gift of fatherhood he'd once thought might never be his. On a warm evening in June, as they sat at the long table on the porch for the evening meal with the ranch hands, Lucy looked around at the faces that had become her family. All the hurt and sadness had gone away. Thomas sat at the head of the table, Emma on his knee as he patiently helped her with her food. Baby William slept contentedly in a basket beside Lucy's chair. Martha fussed over everyone, ensuring cups were filled and plates replenished. The ranch hands shared stories of the day's work, their laughter carrying across the yard. From empty plates to a full table, from solitude to family, from mere survival to a life overflowing with love and purpose. What a wonderful day. As if sensing her thoughts, Thomas caught Lucy's eye across the table and smiled. The same warm smile that had first given her hope on a cold February day when all had seemed lost. Lucy smiled back, cradling the secret she just confirmed that morning. Another Price child would join their family by the following spring. One more to love. The empty plates that had once defined her darkest hour were now just a memory, replaced by a table filled with food, laughter, and the family that love had built. Well, there you have it, folks, a tale of hardship, hope, and the power of human connection. Lucy's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, kindness and resilience can pave the way for a brighter future. What a fantastic turn of events. I hope you enjoyed this journey back to the Old West. And remember, if you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin for more stories of the frontier. We'll see you on the trail.